The Grand Preceptor was enjoying life to the fullest, and everyone around him raised their cups in celebration, toasting to his long, prosperous years. For over 50 years, this man had climbed from nothing to the absolute peak of the empire, holding power over the entire nation. The twists and turns of his journey were enough to fill a multi-million-word saga. He, Li Fan, had been nothing but a poor scholar when he first transmigrated into this world. Such was fate, and really, what more could a man ask for? Everyone began chanting, Grand Preceptor, in excitement. But then an informer burst in, shouting that fire was falling from the sky, some heavenly sign, an auspicious omen, blazing straight toward the Grand Preceptor's manor. Hearing this, even the Grand Preceptor felt a jolt run through his chest. He stepped outside, and the moment he looked up, he exclaimed that this was Dao Xuanji, and asked why the heavens were pushing him so far. The people behind him immediately dropped to their knees, calling the descending figures immortal masters. A lady murmured that this must be an auspicious omen, but the Grand Preceptor was thinking that something was seriously wrong. Above, a voice thundered, demanding that someone hand over a cultivation method. He called out Yu Hong's name, asking if the man really believed he could run to this immortal forsaken land and be left alone. He demanded the cultivation method Yu Hong had taken all those years ago, warning that this wouldn't end unless one of them died today. Yu Hong scoffed, saying it was laughable. After all, he had spent nearly a century stuck at Foundation establishment, unable to break through without the core formation method. Now, when his lifespan was almost gone and he was on the verge of turning to dust, he had finally obtained that very method. How could he possibly hand it over? The figure above agreed coldly, saying the golden core path had always been selfish. Then, with a harsher tone, he demanded what Kuo Hong thought he was doing as he prepared his spear. Kuo Hong readied himself as well, saying that if the man above couldn't withstand the immortal mortal miasma, then perhaps he, Kuo Hong, might still find a chance to survive. Their spiritual energies clashed violently, exploding with a deafening roar. Below, the Grand Preceptor and everyone else watched in stunned silence. But the Grand Preceptor understood immediately. This was bad, very bad. The blast tore through everything. His servants collapsed lifeless to the ground. His wife, his children, gone in an instant. The world around him reduced to nothing but flames and ruin. The once prosperous Swanzing had become a hell of blood and fire, the Grand Preceptor thought. As far as he could see, there were only dead bodies and collapsed buildings. He feared that not even 1 in 100 citizens had survived this catastrophe. All of it was caused by just 2 cultivators who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. And then the Grand Preceptor began laughing like a madman. Ha ha, ha ha ha, how can there be cultivators in this world? He was shouting through that broken laughter. He said that from the very moment he became an official, he had used every ounce of the authority in his hands to search for any trace of the immortal path. After he had risen all the way to Imperial Preceptor, standing above all others, he had scoured the world itself, north to the icy sea, south to the great ocean, east to the ruined abyss, and west to the linked mountains. And yet, in all of Great Xian, he had never found even the faintest shred of proof that immortals existed. He said he had already given up. He had already grown old. So were those 2 figures truly immortals? And if so, where had they come from? Back in the present, he could only think that fate was playing with him again. He began preparing a powerful spell, his expression settling into cold determination. Then he spoke. When truth is taken as false, the false becomes true. Recharging complete. Virtualize the current scene and return to the initial anchor point. The Grand Preceptor explained that this was the name Huanjin had given to his extraordinary treasure. Its power was to turn truth into falsehood and reality into illusion. It transformed his real experiences into a simulated, projected scenario, allowing him to return again to a preset anchor point the moment he first transmigrated into this world. In fact, this was already his second life in the Great Swan Nation. In his first life, despite his ambitions, he had been nothing more than an ordinary man. He had wanted to become a Zhuangguiyan, but failed the imperial examinations over and over. After the age of 30, he finally abandoned the dream of becoming an official and started a small business instead. He became a simple, wealthy merchant, married, had children, and lived an entirely ordinary life. It was only when he grew old and lay on his deathbed that the extraordinary treasure within him finally awakened. That awakening was what led to his meteoric rise in this second life. After the Huanjin system finished recharging, it allowed him to restart his life from the anchor point again and again. But he couldn't restart just yet. There were still important things he had to accomplish in this life. So he began writing, recording everything he needed to leave behind. Then he ordered, "Pass down my decree. Command the garrison camp outside the city to rush to Suwanjing immediately and maintain order after the disaster." Most of Suwanjing's buildings had been reduced to rubble. After his trusted garrison camp took control of the city, they would not only be able to accelerate post-disaster reconstruction, but more importantly, the Grand Preceptor would be able to remain within the military camp, personally overseeing the relief efforts while secretly sending men to investigate the whereabouts of the two cultivators. Several months passed. The ruined city of Suwanjing had only just begun to regain a faint shadow of life. Reporting to the Grand Preceptor, one of his men said, "There are still no new traces of those two cultivators." The Grand Preceptor thought to himself that he shouldn't have allowed himself any hope to begin with. In that case, there was nothing left in this life for him to hold on to. So he initiated the process. As always, the treasure's mechanical voice echoed first. "Virtualize the current scene and return to the initial anchor point." The Grand Preceptor answered softly, "Yes." Everything around him began to rewind. Time folded back on itself. All memories, all events, all 50 years of rise and tragedy collapsed into spiraling streaks of light. As he gazed back across the entirety of his life, he murmured into the collapsing world, "Dao Xuanji, Shuangzi, Kuahong, 50 years from now, I'll be waiting for you in Swanzing." Then he issued the final command, "Huanzhen, restart a new life. Return to the initial anchor point." "Understood," the machine replied, and the process began. The device began narrating his life in a calm, matter-of-fact tone, summarizing decades of struggle in a few heartless lines. "You have returned to Anchor Year 1. Overjoyed, you behaved quite outrageously and were nearly forced by your aunt to drink evil-warding water purchased from the village which, half a year later, you participated in the provincial examination. Although your ranking was poor, over 30th place, you nevertheless succeeded in becoming a provincial graduate, bringing honor to your ancestors." The Grand Preceptor listened silently as the machine continued. "In Anchor Year 2, you took part in the metropolitan examination and passed with high marks. You also performed exceptionally in the palace examination, placing in the second rank and receiving the title of Jinshi." It went on, completely indifferent to the blood and sweat behind each milestone. "You used connections throughout Swanzing City to obtain the post of County Magistrate of Wen County in Jiangnan. In Anchor Year 3, you began cultivating your trusted inner circle. You successfully produced a batch of explosives and matchlock guns. In Anchor Year 5, refugees gathered and rebelled against King Langya's manor. You led troops to the rescue, saving King Langya and his family. King Langya was extremely grateful to you. In Anchor Year 6, you were promoted to prefect of Yuanzhou Prefecture and married the daughter of the Vice Minister of Personnel. The Grand Preceptor could almost see those years flying by as the voice droned on. In Anchor Year 7, your wife bore you a son. In Anchor Year 10, King Langya's consort gave birth to a son. You personally visited to congratulate them, presenting a meticulously prepared gift. In Anchor Year 15, the emperor passed away. King Langya ascended the throne, adopting the era name Xiangjing. Emperor Xiangjing summoned you to the capital, promoted you to Vice Minister of War, and ordered you to lead troops to suppress the rebellions. The device paused only for a moment before continuing. In Anchor Year 18, you completely eliminated the rebel forces. Emperor Xiangjing revoked your military authority, promoted you to Minister of War, and appointed you Grand Tutor to the Crown Prince. In Anchor Year 20, the Empress became entangled in a witchcraft case. Emperor Xiangjing was furious and banished her to the Cold Palace. The Crown Prince privately sought your assistance, and you decisively agreed. Through independent investigation, you uncovered the culprit who had framed the Empress, clearing her name. However, Emperor Xiangjing refused to release her from the Cold Palace. In Anchor Year 25, the device continued. You secretly received word that someone had reported you for privately visiting the Empress in the Cold Palace. In the same year, Emperor Xianjing was assassinated by you while returning to the capital. The officials gathered at the Cold Palace and requested the Empress's return. Soon after, the Crown Prince ascended the throne and changed the era name to Kongning. The unemotional voice went on. In Anchor Year 26, you were further ennobled as Grand Preceptor and appointed Grand Secretary of the Deliberation Pavilion, reaching the pinnacle of officialdom. You used this opportunity to eliminate political rivals and establish your own faction in the imperial court. By Anchor Year 30, the people of the world spoke only of the Grand Preceptor, not the Emperor. In Anchor Year 31, the Empress Dowager became pregnant and bore you a son. In Anchor Year 38, Emperor Kongning died in melancholy. In Anchor Year 40, the Empress Dowager passed away from illness. In Anchor Year 45, your wife passed away. In Anchor Year 46, your eldest son succumbed to illness. In Anchor Year 50, 2 immortals descended from the ruined abyss in the east, destroying Swansing City. You escaped with your life by sheer luck. The voice finally paused. This emulation has ended. You may choose one of the following options to retain. 1. An item you possessed during the simulation. 2. Your cultivation realm from the simulation. 3. The simulated memories of one person closely related to you. This memory can be inherited by that person. 4. Forgo all selections and accelerate the recharging progress. Li Fan stared at the glowing interface, watching those lines hover before his eyes. He wondered to himself whether reality had been turned into illusion, or if it had all simply been an illusion so realistic that it felt true. Or perhaps, after reaching a certain point, the boundary between falsehood and truth simply ceased to exist altogether. He sighed. Forget it. Better to look at the 4 options first. After examining them carefully, he came to his conclusion. There's not much to say about the first and second options. If I were truly embarking on the path of cultivation, both would be extremely useful, but in my previous life I was just a mortal. As for the third option, who knows what a person would become after inheriting decades of memories. No, stability is more important. That left only the 4th option. Li Fan understood it well. Huanzhen's ability to turn illusion into reality required long-term recharging. Whenever he suffered a fatal blow, Huanzhen would automatically consume its stored charge to protect him. That was why he had escaped death so many times in his previous life. So the 4th option, he thought, is the safest and most rational choice. Accelerate the recharging progress. The system interface shifted, displaying his current stats. Name: Li Fan. Realm: mortal. Physiological age: 20/86. Psychological age: 166/1056. Illusion to reality recharge progress: 30%. Li Fan exhaled softly. 3 lifetimes, 166 years. To think I've already lived that long. He noticed another change and murmured to himself, in my last life, the psychological age limit was only a bit over 900 years. Now it's risen past 1,000. He reflected on it calmly. When one carried too many memories, their mind eventually reached a threshold. Too much weight would crush the soul. This was the so-called erosion of time. However, the upper limit of psychological age increased as one's mental endurance improved. And once he truly stepped onto the path of cultivation, this problem would disappear entirely. His eyes sharpened. The goal for this life is to uncover the secrets of cultivation from those 2 cultivators. 50 years from now, they will descend upon Swansing City again. They will arrive unprepared, but I will not. He continued thinking. Perhaps he could rely not only on gunpowder and firearms, but also on the immortal mortal miasma they spoke of. He couldn't afford to wait idly for 50 years. Since those 2 came from the ruined abyss in the east, he could send people to investigate its depths in advance. The most terrifying thing in life, he thought, is to have no goal. In his past life, there were many nights when he awoke in the Empress Dowager's bed, overwhelmed by emptiness and confusion. He had reached the pinnacle of mortal life. There was nowhere else to climb. Even if he repeated that life 100 times, nothing would change. Power, pleasure, after cycling through them so many times, they became as bland as chewed wax. If things had continued that way, he might have simply chosen to stop reincarnating altogether. But the appearance of those 2 cultivators had changed everything. They had revealed a brand new possibility, an unfamiliar, intoxicating world that seemed to beckon him forward. He felt a spark ignite in his chest. I want to cultivate, he thought. I want eternal life. And in that moment, a fierce smile appeared on Li Fan's face. No one can stop me. Then he stretched out his hand and said softly, Dao, Shivangji, Kwahong, see you in 50 years. With the experience of 2 lifetimes behind him, everything in his third proceeded as smoothly as water flowing through a canal. He still participated in the imperial examinations, but this time, with decades of political experience and insight, every essay he wrote carried the weight and sharpness of someone who had lived 100 years. He ranked first in the provincial examination, then first in the metropolitan examination, then first again in the palace examination, a triple first, his name shaking the entire realm. Afterward, he still chose the post of county magistrate of Wen County. The imperial court was confused, regretful, and baffled at why a top-ranked Jinsher would willingly bury himself in such a minor post. But considering his overwhelming fame, his request was approved. Armed with a crystal-clear understanding of the temperament, ambitions, and weaknesses of every official in the region, knowledge inherited from his previous lives, he quickly brought Wen County under control and began promoting the trusted subordinates who had once followed him in past timelines. In Anchor Year 4, he secretly searched and found someone who could serve as a body double for King Langya, training the man as a loyal subordinate. In Anchor Year 5, he ordered that subordinate to disguise himself as a refugee and lead an attack on King Langya's manor. Li Fan staged a heroic rescue, but in truth, he coordinated with his men from inside and outside, eliminating King Langya and his entire family. At the same time, the double took King Langya's place. From that moment onward, he secretly controlled King Langya's entire manor. Even the chief grand secretary's granddaughter, King Langya's consort, was with him. Inquirer 9. King Langya and the chief grand secretary's granddaughter's wedding proceeded as scheduled. That very night, Li Fan stormed the bridal chamber and consummated the marriage with the consort himself. In Anchor Year 10, King Langya's consort gave birth to a son. Of course, he was Li Fan's blood. In Anchor Year 15, the emperor finally grew critically ill. After receiving the Edict of Succession, Li Fan led his trusted subordinates and rushed to the capital. Once King Langya ascended the throne, Li Fan boldly installed his own men into the imperial court. With the secret cooperation of the chief grand secretary, he seized control of the situation without resistance. In Anchor Year 20, after helping his own son become emperor, he ennobled himself as Grand Preceptor. He stepped out from behind the curtains and once again held supreme power over the world. After this, the gears of Great Xian's development did not slow. Instead, under his will, they turned faster than ever. Anchor Year 35, Grand Preceptor's Manor. The Grand Preceptor asks his subordinate whether the mist over the ruined abyss truly disperses for half a day every 15 years. The subordinate reports respectfully that it is indeed so. He explains that the immortal-seeking camp has been stationed at the ruined abyss, observing day and night, and that they made a significant discovery a few days ago. When the great mist dissipated, faint light was seen shining from the bottom of the abyss. Using telescopes, they observed strange, inverted sceneries, visions that differed for each observer. Some of the men claim they saw the 100,000 mountains rising and falling, with magnificent buildings faintly visible within. Others report seeing vast cities spread across plains, bustling with life, with populations likely exceeding 1 million. Still others insist they witnessed a floating city wrapped in multicolored clouds, with rare birds and exotic beasts circling it. The entire scene, he says, was nothing short of miraculous. The Grand Preceptor replies that just as he expected, the origin must indeed be connected to the ruined abyss. He then asks if they have found a method to reach the bottom. The subordinate immediately panics and admits his incompetence. He tells the Grand Preceptor that they tried every method they could think of, but whenever they descended past a certain depth, a sudden astral wind would erupt and tear them apart instantly. He explains that the astral wind is so terrifying that even their strongest armor cannot endure it for even a heartbeat. The Grand Preceptor raises his head and looks toward the distant sky, remarking that it seems he will have to wait for those 2 cultivators after all. Anchor Year 50, Great Swan Nation, Swanjing. When the destined day arrives, chaos erupts in the sky above Swanjing. Firelight and torrents of spiritual power collide violently, shaking the heavens. One cultivator shouts that Swangszi should not push his luck any further. Swangszi, once again, is fighting with all his strength, his spiritual energy roaring like a storm. A moment later, the other cultivator suddenly demands to know who dares to launch a sneak attack. As the two overwhelmingly powerful figures battled in the sky, the soldiers down below were fully prepared. The moment the clash intensified, they raised their guns and opened fire. But against cultivators, such attacks were laughably insignificant. One of the cultivators casually snatched all the bullets out of the air before they could touch him. He wondered aloud what these tiny metal pellets were supposed to be. His curiosity grew, and he even picked up a gun from the ground to examine it. He appeared genuinely surprised as he remarked that the weapon was quite interesting, using intricate mechanical structures in place of spirit formations and relying on explosive force instead of spiritual energy. He commented that it was unexpected that mortals, exiled to this land of immortal severance for several thousand years, had managed to create something so clever. However, he also noted that its usefulness existed only because the great Tao of this land was incomplete. Outside the region of immortal severance, he said, such devices would be nothing but useless scrap metal. His eyes turned cold as he added that mortals daring to attack cultivators was laughable. He admitted that he had originally felt a slight pang of guilt, but now he believed they were simply seeking death. Then he raised a hand and invoked a technique he called Fire Dragon's Roar. A dragon-shaped blaze erupted forth, roaring across the battlefield and tearing through everything in its path. Buildings fell, the ground cracked, and flames consumed entire blocks. But when he surveyed the aftermath, his expression twisted in confusion. He wondered how so many mortals were still alive. His technique was not something ordinary humans should have been capable of surviving. The second cultivator glanced around and offered an explanation. He said these hidden weapons must have been soaked in mortal blood, and that after his companion had been tainted by the immortal mortal miasma, his Tao arts had weakened. He added that they had been ambushed the moment they arrived, and that even the immortal mortal miasma had been deployed against them, clear evidence that their enemies had prepared meticulously. He concluded that the place was too strange and that it was unwise to linger any longer. The first cultivator agreed and said they should leave at once. However, just as they were about to depart, a thunderous voice bellowed from far behind them. Someone called out to Dao Suwangji and Chao Hong, demanding that they halt. The voice warned that if they fled today, news of them obtaining a core formation cultivation method would spread across the entire cultivation world by tomorrow. Dao Suwangji was stunned. He insisted that this was impossible, that only the two of them knew about the method. He wondered how the news could have leaked. Chao Hong immediately demanded to know who the culprit was. Before either of them could react, a rain of hidden weapons and artillery shells came pouring down from above and from all sides. Chao Hong's expression twisted in fury. He declared that the attackers were courting death, and spiritual fire erupted wildly from him as he lashed out in rage. But then the owl spirit perched above gives a sharp warning, telling Dao Suwangji that the situation is bad and urging Chao Hong to dodge quickly. The two cultivators try to react, but the explosions swallow them whole. A massive dust cloud engulfs everything, and a moment later, the pair crashes heavily onto the ground. All around them, the soldiers of Xuanjing stand ready, guns locked and aimed at the cultivators. Dao Suwangji manages to stagger back to his feet, rising slowly despite the injuries. At that moment, a soldier steps forward and announces that the Grand Preceptor has issued an order. If the two cultivators surrender peacefully, their lives will be spared. Dao hesitates for a moment, thinking silently about the situation, but fury begins boiling inside him. He refuses to accept such humiliation. Just as he prepares to act, he notices Chao Hong struggling to speak. Chao Hong tells him to take his storage ring and flee. Above them, a massive fire dragon flickers into existence, Chao Hong's final remnant of power, but it dissolves almost immediately into faint sparks. Chao Hong, a foundation establishment cultivator who had cultivated for 205 years, had built his Dao foundation using the wondrous Kuelong branch in the land of immortal severance. But after being besieged by thousands of mortals and carelessly contaminated by the immortal mortal miasma, his cultivation collapsed in an instant. His lifespan reached its limit. His body lay lifeless, and his Dao dispersed, returning to the heavens. A soldier calls out again, stating that immortal master Dao Suwangji is not the Grand Preceptor's enemy, and that if he ceases resisting, the Grand Preceptor guarantees his safety. Some distance away, the Grand Preceptor listens and reflects. He thinks he heard an unusual sound from the sky when Chao Hong died, though he decides it no longer matters. Capturing an immortal in this life is already impossible. What truly surprises him is how catastrophically lethal the immortal mortal miasma is to cultivators. At that moment, Dao Suwangji rises once again. His expression is calm, yet filled with grief and fury. He declares that he does not know who the attackers truly are or what they seek. He acknowledges that he and Chao Hong have been plotted against, resulting in death and the downfall of their Dao. He states that they should have nothing more to say, but he refuses to accept this ending. He condemns his unseen enemies for hiding behind mortals and for using despicable methods like the immortal mortal miasma, something all cultivators loathe. He says that for Chao Hong, a man who cultivated earnestly for 2 centuries, to die at the hands of such tactics feels undeserved and bitter. He then reminds the soldiers that they have all witnessed Chao Hong's foundation establishment wondrous item, and now, he says, he will show them his own. He announces that, with the wonders of heaven and earth, he forged his Dao foundation. Dao Suwangji then begins preparing something enormous, so enormous that the sky itself distorts. A colossal shape forms high above, gathering power as if the heavens were being carved open. Dao announces that his Dao foundation is called Dao Xian, and that he has a sword he wishes everyone present to witness. Chaos erupts everywhere. Just as the devastating light is about to descend, Li Fan hears a faint voice call the name Huan Zhen, and then, abruptly, the system notification appears. The simulation has ended. Li Fan's consciousness returns to the quiet of the simulation chamber. After experiencing the full weight of Dao Suwangji's final technique, he feels the shock settle deeply in his heart. He reflects that this must be what a cultivator at the peak of foundation establishment truly is. Without the immortal mortal miasma, he admits that reincarnating 100 times would still not be enough for him to pose even the slightest threat to such beings. He had not expected the immortal mortal miasma to kill Chao Hong outright, even collapsing his Dao foundation and dispersing his Dao entirely. He thinks back to their interactions and realizes that the 100 years of brotherhood they spoke of had not been empty words after all. He recalls how Dao Suwangji shouted warnings to Chao Hong the moment they were ambushed, how Chao Hong, when realizing he could not escape death, immediately entrusted the core formation cultivation method to Dao Suwangji, how Dao Suwangji, upon seeing Chao Hong die to an assassination, could not bear it and abandoned his own escape route, choosing instead a final, mutually destructive sword strike. All of it, he reflects, shows a bond deeper than ordinary brotherhood. He remembers Dao Suwangji's earlier words about the golden core path, how on that path there could only be one. The world contains many core formation methods, yet countless cultivators remain trapped in foundation establishment, unable to take the final step. The golden core path is inherently solitary, ruthless by its very nature. Li Fan repeats the thought quietly in his mind. The golden core path, there can be me but no other. If such was the case even for men as close as brothers, he wonders what the cultivation world outside must be like. Still, he feels no hesitation. He tells himself that no matter how dangerous the road ahead may be, he will not waver. With Huan Zhen assisting him, and with sufficient caution and preparation, he believes no obstacle will be insurmountable. Last time, he had chosen to ambush both cultivators at once. Perhaps, he thinks, in the next cycle he can attempt to win one of them over instead. He checks his status and notes that his psychological age limit increased only by a few decades this time. It suggests he is nearly at his limit. Counting the life before he ever transmigrated, this is already his 5th life. Li Fan reflects that the path to immortality is truly arduous. He hopes these 50 years will not be wasted. Anchor Year 35, Endless Ruined Abyss. Drawing upon the knowledge gained from the last simulation, Li Fan heads toward the Endless Ruined Abyss. He reminds himself that the dense fog over the abyss disperses once every 15 years, and that he has come personally this time to witness the phenomenon with his own eyes. After an uncertain amount of waiting, the earth trembles. A colossal surge of white mist erupts upward from the depths, forced out like a reverse waterfall spewing straight into the sky. The violent wind accompanying it howls relentlessly, and it lasts a full quarter of an hour before the dense fog finally begins to disperse. Li Fan takes out his telescope and peers into the now exposed abyss. According to intelligence from the previous life, the scenery at the bottom of the ruined abyss was supposed to differ for each observer. For some, it was mountains. For others, cities. For others still, floating palaces or strange celestial realms. But what Li Fan sees is nothing of the sort. He sees only darkness, a heavy, suffocating void. In that darkness, he senses something faint, indistinct, yet unmistakable, the aura of a dead Tao. He freezes, realizing that the immortal Tao he is seeking is no longer alive. A chill runs down his spine as he questions what could have happened. He wonders what kind of event could kill the immortal Tao itself, and what catastrophe must have befallen the entire cultivation world for such a thing to occur. Anchor Year 50, Xuanjing City. Once again, the scene unfolds exactly as before. Chao Hong and Dao Suwangji are clashing fiercely in the sky, their powers shaking the heavens. Chao Hong warns Dao Suwangji not to push him too far, but before either can escalate, a barrage of gunfire erupts from the ground. The soldiers below unleash round after round, shouting that they have been waiting for Chao Hong under the orders of immortal master Dao Suwangji. Chao Hong is stunned. He wonders how Dao Suwangji could have possibly known his escape route in advance. Then, as the bullets streak toward him, he notices traces of a mortal miasma clinging to them and immediately realizes he has been poisoned by it. He lashes out in fury, accusing Dao Suwangji of using disgraceful tactics. Dao Suwangji, however, is equally furious. He cannot understand why the mortals are attacking Chao Hong under his name, nor how they have access to the immortal miasma. He senses that something is deeply wrong. He explains that these mortals were not sent by him at all. But before he can say more, the soldiers begin shouting again, claiming that Dao Suwangji had promised them freedom from the land of immortal severance if they helped him kill Chao Hong and seize the core formation method. Chao Hong becomes enraged. He insists that only he and Dao Suwangji know about the core formation method, so no one else could have orchestrated this plot. Dao Suwangji is shocked, realizing that the soldiers somehow know about the core formation method. He realizes that an unknown hand is manipulating events. The soldiers then cry out in desperation, reminding Dao Suwangji that they had risked public wrath for the immortal miasma he supposedly requested. They claim that their entire clan now faces destruction from the backlash, and they beg him to honor the promise they believe he made. Dao Suwangji, scanning the scene beneath him, suddenly locates the person he has been searching for. His expression twists with fury, and he dives straight toward the culprit, calling him a shameless villain and demanding silence. His strike tears through the ground, unleashing chaos and destruction. But the moment he attacks, the soldiers begin shouting again, asking if the immortal master intends to kill them now to silence them. Dao Suwangji pauses and wonders what sort of magic artifact is enabling this deception. The target he is pursuing is surprisingly well protected and cautious. As he continues tearing apart the battlefield in search of the hidden manipulator, Chao Hong watches from above. Heartbroken, he declares that in their 100 years together, he never imagined Dao Suwangji could stoop to such wicked schemes. He believes Dao Suwangji is desperate for the core formation method and cannot understand why his old brother would resort to such vile tricks. Dao Suwangji is truly furious. His aura flares violently. Chao Hong, instead of fleeing, begins gathering flames around himself and declares that he will no longer run. If Dao Suwangji wants the core formation method, he may come take it by force. Chao's fire surges, and he unleashes a technique he calls Raging Flame Dragon. A blazing dragon bursts forth once again, descending toward Dao with overwhelming force. Dao does not waste a breath on replying. He steadies his breathing, raises his hand, and summons his enormous sword. The massive blade streaks upward and collides with the fiery dragon, stopping it mid-air. A tremendous beam struggle erupts, light and flame clashing violently above Xuanjing City. On the ground, the soldiers panic. They whisper among themselves that Dao Suwangji is a fickle man who remembers every slight. If he wins, none of them will survive. One of the clan leaders orders his sons to assist immortal master Chao Hong and attack Dao Suwangji. Chao Hong, locked in the clash, lets out laughter. The flames surge higher around him. Dao Suwangji roars for the flames to break, shattering the fiery prison and shooting upward again. He follows by activating his Dao Foundation, summoning a colossal sword, Dao Xian, and sends it directly at Chao Hong with terrifying momentum. Chao Hong only laughs harder. He announces that he wants to see whether Dao Suwangji's Dao Xian is truly stronger than his own Kuelong branch. He activates his own Dao Art Dragon transformation, and his fire dragon swells to titanic size, opening its jaws to devour the sword itself. As the dragon begins overpowering the sword, another wave of fiery bullets comes shooting upward toward Dao Suwangji. The soldiers below shout that they are assisting Immortal Master Chao Hong. The bullets explode mid-air, releasing the immortal mortal miasma once again. The miasma eats into Dao Suwangji's strength immediately. His expression twists in pain. He recognizes the technique instantly and curses the Kuelong branch. A massive phantom tree bursts out from his body, the manifestation of the Kuelong branch, and his spiritual power collapses rapidly. His fate is sealed. Dao Suwangji, a foundation establishment cultivator who cultivated for 201 years, forged his Dao foundation using the strange item rusted sword Dao Xian. But here in the land of immortal severance, he battled with everything he had and ultimately died at the hands of Chao Hong. His body falls lifelessly, and his Dao disperses, returning to the heavens. The Grand Preceptor and his soldiers watch the outcome unfold. The Grand Preceptor notices that the same mysterious voice echoes again, the same one he heard when Chao Hong died in the previous simulation. Chao Hong descends to the ground. Despite his victory, he looks somber and murmurs Dao Suwangji's name with sadness. The Grand Preceptor then steps closer, approaching Chao Hong with deliberate calm. He introduces himself respectfully as Li Fan and offers his greetings to the Immortal Master. Li Fan lowers himself respectfully and implores the Immortal Master to spare the 1,000 lives of his clan. Chao Hong studies him with a cold expression. He remarks that the mysterious voice which echoed earlier must have been Li Fan's work, and he questions how a mere mortal dared to interfere in a clash between cultivators. Chao Hong is clearly displeased. Li Fan, however, explains calmly that everything he did was merely an attempt to grasp the slightest chance of survival. He repeats that if the Immortal Master had been defeated, his clan would surely not have escaped annihilation. Chao Hong, despite being furious at Dao Suwangji's treachery, cannot help thinking of their century-long brotherhood. Still, he acknowledges Li Fan's reasoning. He remarks that a sliver of hope is indeed what everyone in the world struggles for, and that Li Fan dared to risk death at his hands for that reason alone. He says Dao Suwangji had always acted decisive and trustworthy for 100 years, and he never imagined Dao would resort to such despicable deception that even targeted mortals. Chao Hong also states that the Immortal Severance Grand Array is unimaginably dangerous. Even cultivators would struggle to escape it, so bringing mortals along is impossible. Li Fan is stunned and asks whether even the Immortal Master himself does not know a way to leave this sealed land. Chao Hong confirms it. He tells Li Fan bluntly that there is no method for Foundation establishment cultivators to leave with mortals. He adds that Li Fan is only immortal anyway. There would be no reason to lie. Hearing this, Li Fan is overwhelmed with hopelessness. He cannot speak for a long moment, but he collects himself and suggests that this is not a place suitable for further discussion, and invites the Immortal Master to follow him. The two move into an underground shelter and sit down. Once settled, Li Fan brings up the issue again. He asks if the Immortal Master truly meant what he said, that mortals cannot be taken out of the land of immortal severance. Chao Hong answers that a Golden Core Realm cultivator might be capable of shielding a mortal long enough to pass through the Immortal Severance Grand Array, but for someone at Foundation establishment, it is absolutely impossible. He explains that mortals would be torn apart before taking even a single step into the array. Li Fan then asks whether this means mortals have no hope whatsoever of leaving this world. Chao Hong tells him that to leave the land of immortal severance, one must first cross the Grand Array. With a mortal body, survival is impossible. He even questions why Li Fan worries about it at his age, saying that living as a local king should already be good enough. Li Fan, however, quietly raises a different different point. He says that even if he cannot leave, what about his descendants? If future generations of his clan could cultivate until they reached foundation establishment like the immortal master, would they not then be able to leave? Chao Hong bursts into laughter the moment he hears Li Fan's question. He tells Li Fan that the idea is absurd, that the land of immortal severance contains not even a trace of spiritual energy, making cultivation fundamentally impossible. He points out the eternal divide between immortals and mortals, saying that the mortals here are soaked entirely in miasma, their bodies tainted beyond repair. How could such beings possibly cultivate the immortal Tao? He advises Li Fan to abandon the thought altogether. He explains that if mortals truly wish to cultivate, they must first leave this sealed world, rebuild their bodies, and cleanse themselves of the miasma. Without that, even if the path to immortality lay open before them, they would be able to see it, but never touch it. The Grand Preceptor falls silent. He feels his world collapse in an instant. Everything he had chased, everything he had prepared for across lifetimes, the hope of immortality, the plan to grasp cultivation, the belief that his descendants could rise above this prison, shatters before him. With a trembling and devastated voice, he asks whether the separation between immortals and mortals is truly eternal, whether there really is no way at all. Chao Hong answers that there is truly no possibility. The Grand Preceptor closes his eyes and, after a moment of painful composure, turns away. He says that if the immortal master has no further commands, he will take his leave. Even Chao Hong seems taken aback by the sheer weight of Li Fan's despair. But before he can say anything further, he finally senses something unusual. Immortal mortal miasma rapidly spreading throughout the underground chamber. His strength falters instantly, and he collapses, unable to resist the poison. Outside, the Grand Preceptor stands quietly. His expression is cold and determined. He reflects that since immortals and mortals cannot coexist, he has no reason to fully trust a cultivator's words. He reminds himself that he is a mortal, and mortals who cling blindly to an immortal's mercy will always die helplessly. And so, he takes his next step. The Grand Preceptor silently organizes his thoughts, piecing together everything he has learned. He reflects that according to Chao Hong, this place is indeed a true land of immortal severance, and its origin lies in a calamity that struck the ancient cultivation world thousands of years ago. He recalls what Chao Hong implied. In the beginning, cultivators paid little attention to a plague spreading among mortals. It was considered insignificant, just another mortal disease. But everything changed when the first cultivator became infected. Once that happened, the plague mutated, growing stronger and rapidly adapting. Its method of transmission shifted to the very spiritual energy cultivators relied upon. Through the spiritual energy permeating heaven and earth, the plague spread at terrifying speed, engulfing the entire cultivation world. For infected cultivators, mild cases caused their cultivation to regress and their realm to collapse. Severe cases caused complete loss of cultivation overnight. They would become no different from mortals, and shortly after, their bodies would fail and their Tao would disperse back into the heavens. In their despair and fury, cultivators lashed out at what they believed to be the source of the infection, the mortals. Thus began a massive campaign of slaughter. Mortals fled in confusion, not knowing why they were being hunted, not understanding what sin they had committed. They simply kept running, though they knew nothing of the plague or why cultivators had turned against them. But before long, the slaughter was forcibly halted. The plague did not diminish with the deaths of mortals. Instead, with fewer mortal hosts, it escaped all restraints, spreading even more violently along the spiritual energy of the world. Because it now spread directly through the energy of heaven and earth itself, even more cultivators fell. The cultivators realized that merely waiting for death was not their nature. One group began researching methods to cure or resist the plague. The others proposed a drastic measure, the infamous Great Migration Plan. The plan was simple and cruel. All mortals in the cultivation world would be relocated, banished, to surrounding small worlds devoid of spiritual energy, to shattered grotto heavens, abandoned realms, and similar isolated places. Then, powerful arrays would be erected to seal these worlds forever, ensuring that mortals could never return. After this plan, there were no mortals left in the cultivation world. But time passed, and cultivators had descendants. Not all children born from cultivator lineages possessed spiritual roots. Many were born as ordinary mortals. Inside the bodies of these mortals, faint traces of the ancient plague still lingered. And because this plague remained lethally dangerous to cultivators, these descendants, if they wished to cultivate, first had to completely cleanse the plague from their bodies. In time, the plague became synonymous with the divide between immortals and mortals. People eventually named it the immortal mortal miasma. Among the ancient records Li Fan studies, he finds a letter noting that, in order to prevent high-level cultivators who had been exiled for long periods from dying off, the mortals were first used to form and stabilize the lands of immortal severance. These lands served as buffers, isolated regions where mortals were sealed away so the plague would no longer contaminate the cultivation world. The Grand Preceptor reads this and sighs inwardly. He realizes that there is no telling how many such lands exist across countless shattered worlds, and even fewer cultivators would dare to enter them. For him to have encountered 2 of them in his lifetime had already been an unbelievable stroke of luck. But luck was not eternity. He reflects that he is still a mortal, bound by the limits of mortal flesh. Although he can simulate reincarnation, each cycle is only a repetition within the span of his natural lifespan. He is already 70 years old. His physical limit sits at 86. 16 years remain. In such a short time, the chance of encountering another cultivator is nearly 0. He wonders if he truly is fated to repeat the life of a mortal again and again, trapped in endless cycles. After waiting bitterly for nearly 300 years across multiple lives, how could he be willing to resign himself to such a fate? He asks himself if there is truly no path out. Unable to accept this truth, he presses Chao Hong further. He asks how the mortals from the Great Migration were originally brought into the land of immortal severance. Chao Hong replies that they were essentially prisoners, dragged here while weakened by the immortal mortal miasma and bound with restrictive chains. Chao Hong expresses irritation, pointing out that Li Fan still hasn't given up. He asks what the point would be even if Li Fan managed to leave. A 70-year-old mortal still wanting to cultivate. Wasn't that absurd? Li Fan ignores the insult and instead asks whether, now that Chao Hong has lost all his cultivation, he would be able to cultivate again if he returned to the outside world. Chao Hong is taken aback. Li Fan calmly adds that if Chao Hong can help him find a way to return to the cultivation world, then perhaps he might even take Chao Hong with him when the time comes. Chao Hong reacts with outrage, calling Li Fan a treacherous villain trying to deceive him yet again. But Li Fan responds that whether it is truth or deception, it is still a sliver of hope. He asks Chao Hong whether he truly intends to give up that hope and die of old age in this tiny sealed world. Chao Hong is struck silent. After a long moment, he finally answers. He says that, if he remembers correctly, the artifacts used during the Great Migration should have been something like flying boats or flying shuttles. He explains that in ancient times, the cultivation world was vast, prosperous, and filled with countless sections. Transportation artifacts such as those were extremely common. Chao Hong continues explaining that after the Great Change, every cultivator feared for their own survival. They began acting alone, refusing to travel together. Thus, flying boats and shuttles grew rarer and rarer until they nearly vanished from the world. The Grand Preceptor is startled. He asks whether the great change in heaven and earth refers to the bizarre plague of immortal mortal miasma. Chao Hong shakes his head. He clarifies that although the immortal mortal miasma was strange, it alone was not enough to shake the foundation of the cultivation world. The only reason the miasma spread so violently was because most cultivators had already fallen in an earlier disaster, the great calamity of the cultivation world, rooted in the golden core path where there can be only one. He explains that although countless core formation methods exist, the number of cultivators trapped in foundation establishment is far, far greater. Li Fan, the Grand Preceptor, suddenly connects the dots and asks whether this calamity means immortal methods cannot be cultivated simultaneously by multiple people. Chao Hong confirms it. He adds that ancient records say there was no such restriction in the distant past. The great sects of old were countless, prosperous, and open. Disciples learned side by side, guided by their masters, sparring freely with fellow practitioners of the same method. It had been a golden age, magnificent, vigorous, lively. But then, everything changed. Chao Hong explains that one day, cultivators realized their efficiency in cultivating plummeted dramatically. While meditating, each practitioner could feel, deep within their Tao heart, exactly how many people were cultivating the same method across the entire world. They soon discovered something terrifying. The more people who cultivated the same method simultaneously, the lower the cultivation efficiency for everyone involved. Cultivators across the world stagnated. Foundation establishment establishment cultivators remained stuck. Golden core cultivators stalled at their bottlenecks, and as the years passed and lifespans neared their ends, hidden killing intent surfaced. People who were masters and disciples the day before, people who had called each other brothers and sisters, suddenly all viewed each other as mortal enemies. Chao Hong says that within a single night, the entire cultivation world changed. Anyone who practiced the same method as you instantly became a threat. Someone stealing your Tao, your progress, your lifespan. Someone blocking your path. And so, as long as another person cultivated the same method, the conclusion was inevitable. A fight to the death. Even the rogue cultivators who fled into deep mountains or hid themselves inside secret realms were eventually hunted down. Chao Hong explains that escape was impossible because anyone practicing the same method could sense the presence of others cultivating that same method, no matter how far apart they were. The Grand Preceptor then asks how cultivators manage to practice in the present age, given that immortal methods cannot be cultivated simultaneously. He also wonders what the cultivation world has become after surviving such a calamity. Chao Hong answers that in the current era, anyone who wishes to cultivate has only a handful of choices. First, they may join the Myriad Immortals League, a loose alliance composed of many independent cultivators. Within the league, practitioners can exchange for cultivation manuals and resources using contribution points, which are earned by completing missions or trading with other members. Second, there is the Five Elders Association, an organization created by 5 supreme experts. Its influence is vast. Anyone with cultivation aptitude may voluntarily join, choose a cultivation method to practice, and receive support. The cost, however, is steep. Members must sign a sole contract pledging to serve the 5 Elders Association for a fixed period of time. Hearing this, the Grand Preceptor comments that from Chao Hong's description, it sounds almost as if cultivation methods are not scarce at all in the modern cultivation world. Chao Hong replies that this is a misunderstanding. The methods available through these organizations are all fragmented. They were newly compiled over the years by the major powers. A practitioner can cultivate these fragments up to the peak of the Qi refinement realm at most. Beyond that, the path ends. If one desires to take the next step and form a Tao foundation, they must abandon their previous method and switch to an entirely new one. And the same thing happens again above foundation establishment. Each breakthrough requires a new method. The Grand Preceptor asks whether switching methods each time a realm is broken through means all previous cultivation is wasted. Chao Hong says that is not entirely true. He explains that all cultivators practice something known as a fragment of the supreme primitive true scripture. It is not a cultivation method so much as a secret art. Its purpose is to allow cultivators to voluntarily disperse their own realm without suffering catastrophic losses. After dispersing their cultivation to switch to a new method, they can rapidly catch up to the level they had before. The Grand Preceptor marvels at the explanation. He remarks that such a wondrous art, something allowing cultivators to disperse their realms without fatal loss, could only have appeared at the perfect time. Otherwise, the world's cultivators would never have accepted the constant switching of cultivation methods. Chao Hong answers that cultivators have no choice. He sighs and says that a true method is almost impossible to obtain. He adds that Taoist Wang Ji never understood, even at the moment of his death, that the reason Chao Hong seized the method and fled was not solely because it was a core formation method. It was because it was a true method, one capable of leading directly to the nascent soul realm. The Grand Preceptor turns this over in his mind. Nascent soul, true method, the implications are enormous. Chao Hong then shares more basic knowledge of the cultivation world. For example, how a cultivator's death triggers celestial phenomena within a certain radius, before returning to the main subject. Chao Hong says he once heard rumors that over the millennia, mortals from the lands of immortal severance have occasionally and secretly returned to the cultivation world. Most consider such stories mere gossip, with no solid evidence. The Grand Preceptor replies that rumors often hide truth. Smoke rarely exists without some fire. As long as there is even the faintest possibility, he will not abandon hope. Chao Hong mutters that he cannot imagine how someone so old, already with one foot in the grave, still has so much fight left in him. The Grand Preceptor calmly states that if Chao Hong helps him find a path back to the cultivation world, he will not only free him and take him along, but also return everything belonging to both him and Dao Suwangji, including the nascent soul true method. Chao Hong is stunned. He asks if Li Fan is truly serious. Li Fan assures him that he is. Chao Hong agrees. He says that if this is the case, he will spare no effort in helping. The Grand Preceptor later reflects on the efforts that followed. With Chao Hong's assistance, he collected every historical text and ancient record in the land, seeking even the faintest clue about the Great Migration era within the broken remnants of antiquity. Meanwhile, he mobilized the army to excavate ancient tombs on a massive scale, hoping to uncover relics, artifacts, or any trace that could point to the method used for migration. These actions stirred massive resentment among the populace. Officials submitted admonishing memorials every day, but he suppressed all opposition with iron will. Even so, he acknowledges bitterly that far too much time has passed since the Great Migration. The clues are too scarce, and his remaining lifespan is simply too short. 16 years later, underground vault. The Grand Preceptor sits alone in the cold depths of the vault, his back hunched, his breath shallow. He reflects silently that his time is nearly up, and yet he has found nothing. No concrete path, no method to escape the land of immortal severance. His body feels frail, like a candle guttering in the wind, liable to be extinguished at any moment. Before this life ends, he resolves to examine the contents of the storage ring thoroughly. Inside, countless items rest in neat arrays. Intricate devices from the Thousand Mechanisms sect, jade rings, golden chapters, handwritten notes, and even a nascent soul stage cultivation method. Yet, under current cultivators, the number recorded is 0. He sighs inwardly. The nascent soul stage, what a supreme treasure. Yet he remains a mortal, unable to sense spiritual energy at all. He sits upon a mountain of priceless treasures, but has no fate to enjoy any of them. His gaze falls upon the rusted sword Dao Xian, the foundation establishment's strange object Dao Suangji used to build his Dao foundation. According to Chao Hong, once a cultivator dies, the wondrous properties of their foundation establishment object fade along with their body and Tao. Yet, as he examines it now, he feels a faint but undeniable flow of energy pulsing from the blade. A moment later, a soft notification chimes in his mind. Chargeable item detected. Rusted sword Dao Xian, damaged. Would you like to channel energy and recharge? The Grand Preceptor stares in stunned silence. The sword is not dead, can still be recharged, and the system is offering him the option. Li Fan chooses to confirm the option. The system immediately responds, indicating that anchor charging progress has begun. A small bar appears, rising slowly from 1%, while a separate line shows that his current number of anchor points is 1. As the process unfolds, Li Fan quietly reflects. According to Huan Zhan's information, once the anchor charging progress reaches 100%, a second anchor point will be unlocked. From that moment onward, whenever he chooses to return, the entire simulation will be virtualized, and he will be able to restart from any unlocked anchor point. The thought excites him. Unlocking a second anchor point would be unbelievably convenient. Strange objects of heaven and earth may be rare here, but the cultivation world beyond is vast and boundless. There must be countless strange objects waiting to be discovered. As long as he can escape this land and break its shackles, the possibilities are endless. He notes that aside from some basic spirit stones, the ring contains nothing else worth taking. It is time to end this life. He calls upon Huanjin. The system immediately displays the familiar prompt. This simulation has ended. Please select one option to retain. An item held during the simulation. Your cultivation stage from the simulation. The simulation memory of one closely related individual. Forgo all choices to accelerate anchor charging. Li Fan selects retain one item. All the items he acquired appear before him in glowing projection. Scrolls, treasures, fragments, tools. He is momentarily impressed, but quickly realizes something frustrating. Items stored inside the storage ring cannot all be retained at once. He mutters to himself that there is no help for it. He must choose the nascent soul cultivation method. The moment he confirms his choice, the system flashes his status window. But something new appears that makes him freeze. Nascent soul true method bound. Li Fan realizes that this means the method has been permanently stored inside Huanjin. It cannot be lost, destroyed, or taken away. It will follow him across every life. He understands instantly that this single change drastically widens his strategic possibilities. He recalls that in his previous life, in order to find a way to the cultivation world, he mobilized the empire to excavate ancient tombs on a massive scale. That monumental operation shook the whole nation. Even with his overwhelming authority, it incited fierce resistance. If the imperial court attempted something similar right after stabilizing, the backlash backlash would be uncontrollable. But if he begins preparing from an early stage, if he starts shaping thought, reforming beliefs, subtly altering the worldview of the common people, then with 2 decades of careful planning, it may be possible to normalize the idea of grand excavation. It might not be impossible to shift the entire mindset of the nation. Time passes. The system announces that his 6th life has begun. With Li Fan secretly fanning the flames of reform and policy, countless subtle changes begin rippling through the world. Anchor Year 5. A new ideological movement suddenly appears, the Antiquarian School. Carrying several exquisitely preserved ancient scrolls, they travel to Xianjing to seek an audience with the emperor. These texts are so refined, so unprecedented in craftsmanship, that their very appearance shocks the world. The scrolls bear the titles I Ching, Tao Te Ching, Manhwa, the Analects, the Great Learning. Their authenticity and mysterious origins shake scholars across the realm. Anchor Year 6. The Son of Heaven suddenly falls gravely ill. His condition worsens daily, and all imperial physicians are helpless. At this desperate moment, the Antiquarian School presents a pill to the emperor. With no alternatives left, the dying emperor consumes it. Unexpectedly, the pill works. Within a few days, the Son of Heaven fully recovers, and the Antiquarian School's reputation spreads across the entire realm like wildfire. Anchor Year 11. In Zhonghua Prefecture, a massive tomb robbing case is uncovered. A team of more than 100 tomb raiders is captured. The Zhonghua prefect, Li Fan himself, does not dare make a decision on such a severe matter. He immediately sends an urgent letter, 800 li expedited, requesting the emperor's judgment. A month passes before the decree finally arrives. The emperor spares them from execution and instead orders them enslaved and transported to the capital. Anchor Year 15. The emperor once again falls gravely ill. Remembering the miraculous pill years ago, he becomes obsessed with finding another immortal elixir to prolong his life. He deploys an army of more than 100,000 to excavate ancient tombs across the land in search of clues. But immortal pills are too rare. The emperor dies with deep regret. Yet the wave of antiquarianism and large-scale tomb exploration only intensifies. Before his death, he passes the throne to King Langya. With this, Li Fan once again secures his position, controlling the empire from behind the scenes. Anchor Year 23. As tombs are unearthed one after another, fragments of ancient history begin to reappear. The earliest dynasty traceable in the records is identified, the Qi dynasty. Scholars and commoners alike are astonished. Li Fan issues a grand proclamation. Anyone who discovers an ancient tomb from the Qi dynasty shall be infected as a marquis. This unprecedented bounty explodes across the nation. Anchor Year 25. At long last, the imperial expedition uncovers the tomb of the first emperor of the Qi dynasty, Yi Xing. In just over a month, a passage to the main tomb chamber is cleared. Then, after all obstacles are removed and the final seal is broken, Li Fan, surrounded by crowds of officials, soldiers, scholars, and antiquarians, steps into the ancient darkness. He enters the tomb of the ancient emperor with his own hands. The main tomb passage extended for several hundred meters. Both walls were covered in vivid, lifelike murals, paintings that remained astonishingly clear even after several thousand years. The deeper the group walked, the more the murals seemed to glow under their torchlight, as if they were watching the living past unfold. Eventually, they reached the main tomb chamber. The chamber itself was colossal, 40 to 50 meters high, and stretching thousands of meters in both length and width. The ceiling had been crafted to mimic the night sky, embedded with tens of thousands of night-luminous pearls arranged in the pattern of ancient constellations. The light from above cast gentle star-like radiance across the chamber. Mountain peaks dotted the chamber, rising tall and imposing. All of them were submerged in a fixed sea of clouds. No one understood how such a phenomenon had been created. The clouds did not drift, nor had they dissipated across millennia. They simply hung there, still and eternal. Invisible paths connected the peaks, and as the expedition walked across them, even the most hardened officials could not help expressing awe. Li Fan himself could not help thinking that these must be the methods of true immortals. Eventually, their path brought them to the tallest peak, atop which stood a simple thatched hut. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, even humble, but as they approached, they realized the thatch was woven from countless strands of fine gold thread, each thinner than hair. Li Fan ordered 2 guards to open the door. They complied immediately. Inside, Li Fan stepped into the chamber alone. What he saw first completely froze him in place. On the inner wall, a simple inscription was carved. Taihang Sect, Outer Sect Disciple, Yixing. The Grand Preceptor stood silently for a long moment, absorbing the truth. It appeared that this Yixing had indeed joined a cultivation sect, but only as an outer sect disciple, one who never stepped onto the immortal path. In the end, he must have been exiled to this sealed land just like all mortals during the Great Migration. What struck Li Fan most was that even in death, the man had not identified himself as an emperor of the Qi dynasty. He still called himself an outer sect disciple of the Taihang sect. Li Fan remembers Chao Hong's earlier explanation that all great sects in the world supposedly perished in the Great Calamity before the Great Migration. Yet this tomb told a different story. Clearly, there was a hidden chapter of history here. He deduces that Yixing must have been involved with the Taihang sect, one of those responsible for the Great Migration in this realm. What he truly wished to confirm was whether the flying boat used during the migration still existed. A subordinate reports that the camp has found records indicating a flying boat listed among the burial goods of a nearby chamber. However, that chamber had already been looted. Li Fan is stunned, and the subordinate continues. Judging by the damage, the looting occurred more than 1,000 years ago. Li Fan feels a wave of despair crash into him. It is happening again. He loses control for a moment and smashes several objects in fury. He cries out internally that every time hope appears, each time he glimpses a path forward, it dissolves into nothingness, like a flower in the mirror or the moon reflected in water, beautiful but forever beyond reach. After regaining some composure, he issues a proclamation. A bounty shall be announced to the entire world. Anyone who discovers clues related to the immortal flying boat will be enfeoffed as a marquis governing 1,000 households. Anchor Year 35. Another informer arrives with trembling urgency. He reports that an immortal's tomb has been discovered. The informer explains further. A few days prior, a group excavating an inconspicuous grave was struck by a mysterious force, suffering heavy casualties. The antiquarian camp sent experienced veterans overnight, but even they could not disturb the tomb. Despite the grave's small size, it resisted all attempts to open it. Li Fan immediately orders them to bring the immortal mortal miasma and unseal the tomb using it. His voice leaves no room for hesitation. The officers rush to obey. As the miasma is spread around the tomb, Li Fan reminds them to exercise extreme caution during excavation. If they find anything resembling a flying boat, they must report to him at once. The soldiers acknowledge his command and proceed. Moments later, another informer comes running, breathless and excited. He reports that among the burial goods, there appears to be an item resembling a flying boat. Li Fan's heart leaps. He doesn't even wait for further explanation. He immediately rushes to the site. When he arrives and sees the object with his own eyes, he is struck speechless for a moment. Is this supposed to be a flying boat? He steps closer, and the truth becomes obvious. The object is far, far too small. Li Fan looks at the tiny wooden boat and cannot help wondering whether this could really be the flying boat he has spent so many lifetimes searching for. As he walks deeper into the tomb, his eyes fall upon a series of carvings left on the wall by the tomb's owner before death. Only after reading them does he finally understand the entire story. The tomb owner was named Qian Hong, a foundation establishment cultivator. More than 3,000 years ago, he had been hunted by enemies and, with no way to escape, fled into the land of immortal severance. Because the sealed realm lacked even a trace of spiritual energy, he relied solely on a few spirit stones he carried. But the stones quickly ran out. Without spiritual energy to replenish himself, his cultivation weakened day by day. In time, he became little different from an ordinary mortal. He speculated that when mortals were exiled into this land during the Great Migration, 1 or 2 flying boats must have been left behind. Clinging to that hope, he searched the sealed world tirelessly. After decades, he finally discovered the tomb of Yixing, and indeed, a flying boat boat was inside. But to his despair, the core formation array powering the flying boat had long since been ruined. Without the art of artifact refinement, he could not repair it. Unable to restore his cultivation or leave the sealed world, he abandoned his final hope. Before death, Qian Hong carved his last message. If a fellow Taoist obtains this and returns to the immortal world, please consider the items in this tomb my humble thanks. Li Fan stands silently after reading it. With the protection of the formation array outside the tomb, Qian Hong must have been confident that someday another cultivator would arrive. Li Fan decides to examine what has been left behind. The first item he uncovers is labeled Heaven and Earth Strange Object, Halting Steel Fragment. The Grand Preceptor recognizes that this must have been the true source of the tomb's protection. Heaven and Earth Strange Objects rarely decay naturally. Unfortunately, Huan Zhen shows no reaction. Li Fan understands why. They had used an enormous amount of mortal miasma to force open the tomb. The halting steel fragment must have been contaminated, transforming it into an ordinary stone. Its miraculous properties are lost. He lets out a long sigh. He then moves to the second item. It is a manual titled Lesser Huan Zhen Art Qi Refinement Stage Cultivation Method. Below it is a line. Current cultivators. 1. Li Fan's eyes narrow. Even after 3,000 years, someone somewhere is still cultivating this rare method, one connected to the mysterious Huanjin. The second cultivation manual in the tomb is labeled Cloud Water Record Foundation Establishment Stage Cultivation Method. Beneath it is the same strange line. Current cultivators. 1. Li Fan frowns. Someone is currently cultivating it. He wonders if this could be some kind of trap, but then dismisses the thought. More than 3,000 years have passed. Forget foundation establishment. Even a golden core cultivator would have long turned to dust by now. If so, why do these methods still show active cultivators? He quickly grasps the truth. After the Great Calamity, cultivation methods were repeatedly recompiled by major powers like the Myriad Immortals League and the Five Elders Association. If these methods originated from that era, then the versions circulating today must have passed through countless hands. They likely have an original archive, and whenever the authorities see a method with no active practitioners, they reissue it for exchange. In other words, in the span of 3,000 years, these two methods have probably been cultivated by countless individuals. Li Fan quietly acknowledges how dark and complicated the system is. He moves to the third item and freezes. Before him lies the Taihang boat, the very flying vessel used by the ancient Taihang sect to migrate mortals to this sealed world. After wandering for several millennia, it has finally fallen into his hands. Huan Zhen immediately provides a description. Taihang boat, tool used by the Taihang sect during the Great Migration. Internal formation array damaged. Li Fan feels overwhelming emotion. After hundreds of years of searching, his wish is finally fulfilled. Though damaged, the flying boat exists, and he no longer cares that he himself cannot repair it, because he knows someone who can. Anchor Year 50, once again the day of the battle. Just as before, Chao Hong and Dao Suwangji clash in the sky of Swanjing. Their voices echo through the heavens. Dao Suwangji demands that Chao Hong hand over the method he obtained that day, insisting he won't simply let him escape into the land of immortal severance. But before the argument escalates, an unexpected voice cuts through the air. Someone says that a mere core formation method is hardly worth fighting to the death over. Both cultivators freeze in shock. Neither sensed this person approach. They demand to know who dares speak such arrogant words. Down below, Li Fan calmly calls out, inviting both of them to come down and have a discussion. The sudden composure in his tone unsettles both Dao Suwangji and Chao Hong. Yet they descend, landing silently, each watching the other with caution. And thus, three figures gather on the ground. One mortal Grand Preceptor, and two furious foundation establishment cultivators. Neither Dao nor Chao speaks first. They simply wait, silent and wary, unsure how a mortal dares insert himself into a battle of this scale. Li Fan stands before them, expression steady, since he is the one with control. The Grand Preceptor begins laughing, his voice warm and confident as he explains that when his ancestor lay dying, he left behind a prophecy that one day, two individuals would emerge from the ruined abyss in the east and step foot in the capital. When that day came, it would mark his clan's opportunity to finally leave this sealed world. For thousands of years, the clan had half believed and half doubted this cryptic prediction. Now that it has come true before his eyes, he insists it is an occasion worthy of great celebration. Chao Hong studies him carefully and asks how he should address him. The Grand Preceptor replies calmly that he is Li Fan. Dao Suwangji then comments that Li Fan makes it sound as though his ancestor predicted thousands of years in advance that the two of them would arrive here. He also asks what Li Fan means by opportunity to leave this place. Li Fan's eyes sharpen. He asks whether the two of them truly do not believe him. Chao Hong admits that the matter sounds far too mysterious. He explains that although he and Dao Suwangji have wandered the cultivation world for a century, neither of them has ever heard of a divination art capable of predicting events thousands of years into the future. Li Fan responds by asking whether they have ever heard of the Tianyan sect. The moment the name is spoken, both cultivators stiffen. Chao Hong immediately reacts in shock, asking if Li Fan is referring to the ancient sect renowned throughout the cultivation world for its unparalleled divination arts. Li Fan confirms it. He takes a deep breath and declares that his ancestor had indeed been a member of the Tianyan sect. He explains that although his ancestor had joined the sect, the old man had little interest in cultivation itself. Instead, he became obsessed with the arts of calculation and divination. Under normal circumstances, this would have been harmless. But when the great calamity struck and the mortals were ordered to migrate, his ancestor, who possessed only early-stage qi refinement cultivation, would not have been compelled to participate. However, seeing his family descend into terror during those chaotic days, the ancestor volunteered to oversee the mortal migration. Once he carried them into safety, he chose to remain in the sealed land and live out his days among his own people. Dao Suwangji nods slowly, saying he finally understands the background. He then asks Li Fan why he stopped their fight. Li Fan answers steadily. No cultivator had set foot in this sealed world for thousands of years. When he saw the two of them today, he immediately knew they were the very individuals prophesied by his ancestor, the key to freeing his clan from this land. Seeing them about to fight to the death over a mere core formation method, he had no choice but to intervene as quickly as possible. Dao Suwangji admits that he and Chao Hong have made fools of themselves. He explains that cultivation methods are incredibly rare in the outside world, and that fighting to the death over a single scroll is entirely normal. Li Fan sighs softly, asking whether things in the cultivation world truly have to be so cruel. Dao catches the tone in Li Fan's voice and begins to suspect something. Before he can finish speaking, Li Fan cuts straight in. He reveals that before his ancestor died, he left behind a cultivation method scroll capable of leading directly to the golden core stage. Chao Hong reacts immediately. His eyes brighten with surprise and excitement. He says that if such a method exists, then he and Dao Suwangji would no longer need to fight at all. Dao keeps his composure but directly asks what Li Fan seeks in return. Li Fan explains that his ancestor's last wish was to return to the Taihang sect. Before death, besides leaving behind the golden core method, the ancestor also passed down a Dharma artifact called the Taihang boat. Although it is damaged, his ancestor used the Taiyan divination art to calculate that someday, two cultivators would arrive in this land, one skilled in sword arts and one who loved refining artifacts. These two would help the descendant clan repair the Taihang boat and escape this despairing world. Dao is stunned. He exclaims that the description matches perfectly. Chao Hong is obsessed with artifact refinement, while he himself walks the sword path. He wonders aloud whether the Taiyan sect's methods were truly so incredible. Chao Hong is equally shocked, remarking that it is unimaginable for someone at only the qi refinement stage to possess such unfathomable divine power. Li Fan grows quiet for a moment, then invites them to examine the cultivation method scroll for themselves. As they prepare to leave, Dao jokes that Chao Hong already obtained one core formation method and still wants more. Chao Hong retorts that in that case he will stay behind. And so, exactly as Li Fan anticipated, Chao Hong remains, while Dao Suwangji follows him. The moment they enter the hidden chamber, Dao Suwangji notices the thick mortal miasma lingering in the air, and is visibly startled. Li Fan calmly explains that mortals must resort to such measures to protect their family's priceless heirlooms and asks Dao to take a look. He presents the scroll. Dao Suwangji unrolls it and instantly freezes. It reads, Thousand Mechanisms, Jade Ring, Golden Chapter, Nascent Soul Stage Cultivation Method. Current cultivators, 0. Dao Suwangji is shaken to the core. He recognizes immediately that this is a genuine nascent soul cultivation method. The shock on his face is impossible to hide. Li Fan inwardly notes that everything is proceeding exactly as he predicted. Out loud, he asks whether Dao now believes him. He explains that earlier, in front of Chao Hong, he intentionally said it was only a core formation method. He feared Chao Hong might again harbor malicious intentions. Dao Suwangji praises Li Fan's cautiousness, saying he respects his meticulous thinking. He promises that Chao Hong truly is proficient in artifact refinement, and that he will fully persuade him to help repair the Taihang boat. Li Fan laughs heartily, saying that he will be counting on Dao. Once the boat is repaired, he will personally hand over the cultivation method with both hands. Later, Dao returns to inform Chao Hong. Chao Hong reacts with excitement. He realizes that Li Fan was telling the truth and that an ancestral method really does exist. Dao confirms he saw it with his own eyes. But just as Li Fan predicted, Chao Hong begins harboring malicious thoughts. He silently thinks that Li Fan is merely a mortal and that he could simply take the cultivation method by force. Chao Hong privately wonders whether he can simply take the cultivation method by force. After all, Li Fan is only a mortal. What resistance could he possibly put up? But Dao Suwangji stops him. Dao points out that although Li Fan is indeed mortal, he is a descendant of the Taiyan sect, and the divination art he displayed earlier was terrifying and unfathomable. Dao warns that forcing Li Fan might trigger hidden contingencies. Repairing the Taihang boat is not even a difficult task for them, so why create unnecessary trouble? Chao Hong reluctantly agrees. He thinks that if Li Fan were to reveal in desperation that the method was actually a nascent soul technique, the consequences would be far more complicated. The next day, Li Fan hands the Taihang boat over to the two cultivators for repairs. When Chao Hong examines it, he is immediately astonished. He comments that, as expected of a treasure from the Taiyan sect, its refinement techniques are ingenious and its internal formations profound, far superior to anything he has ever studied. He admits that successfully repairing this would greatly elevate his own artifact refining Dao. Li Fan expresses gratitude. He promises that whatever resources they need, he will provide without hesitation. Time flows steadily. Cultivation does not heed the passing of years, and neither does artifact refinement. Although the Taihang boat looks like a small wooden vessel on the outside, it takes nearly an entire year of effort for Chao Hong and Dao Suwangji to fully repair it. When the news reaches Li Fan, he hurriedly goes to inspect the results. Chao Hong reports that the boat's core power formation, its transformation and scaling array, and its dust cleansing formation have all been restored to full functionality. Only the defensive and offensive formations could not be fully repaired due to material limitations, so they could perform only basic fixes on those. He assures Li Fan that breaking through the immortal Severance Grand Array should not be difficult, but handling attacks from cultivators during the journey will be challenging. Li Fan studies the repaired vessel and is struck by its magnificence. He responds that it does not matter. As long as the boat can travel outside the immortal Severance Grand Array, they can return to the cultivation world. With his ancestor's token, he believes he can eventually find a way back to the Taihang sect. Chao Hong continues explaining. The Taihang boat uses spiritual energy as its power source and must be controlled via spiritual sense. It has 3 transformation levels. The first form, 10 meters long, 2 to 3 meters wide. The second form, 100 meters long. The final form, 1,000 meters in length, its full capacity. However, spirit stone reserves are limited. Chao Hong says that what he loaded into the boat is enough for Li Fan to leave the sealed land in the second form, but not much more. Chao Hong reminds Li Fan that piloting the Taihang boat requires at least chi refinement level spiritual sense, and he wonders whether the Grand Preceptor will need their assistance. But before he can finish asking, a powerful surge of energy ripples through the chamber. The Taihang boat responds instantly. Chao Hong is stunned. He remarks that Li Fan's methods are truly extraordinary. He is actually able to control the Taihang boat despite being immortal. Li Fan laughs lightly, saying it is nothing more than a few insignificant tricks and not worth mentioning. He expresses sincere gratitude to the two cultivators, explaining that after after 1,000 years of being trapped in this place, hope has finally appeared, and it is due to their efforts. Dao Suwangji then asks what they discussed earlier, whether the Grand Preceptor has something ready for them. Li Fan nods. Everything is already prepared, he says. He invites Dao Suwangji to follow him so he can receive it. 3 days later, after receiving the cultivation method scrolls, Chao Hong and Dao Suwangji come to bid farewell. Dao explains that their spirit stones are nearly exhausted. If they remain in the land of immortal severance any longer, their cultivation will decline sharply, so they must leave immediately. He says that if Li Fan ever makes it out, he may come find him at Linqian City in the Kongyun mountain range. Chao Hong then presents a carefully drawn map. It depicts the region near the exit of the sealed land. He apologizes that there were no jade slips available, so he had to draw it using brush and paper. Li Fan thanks him earnestly. After exchanging a few more polite words, Chao Hong and Dao Suwangji transform into 2 streaks of light and shoot across the sky, leaving the mortal realm behind. As they depart, Chao Hong comments that Li Fan possesses astonishing willpower and is indeed an extraordinary mortal. He adds that it is unfortunate Li Fan is so old. Even if he reaches the cultivation world, he will not have many years left. Dao replies that without eternal life, everything else is meaningless. He says that the reason they fought so desperately earlier was precisely because they still held hope for immortality. Chao Hong then asks Dao exactly what cultivation method Li Fan gave him. Dao suggests that it might be similar to the one Chao Hong received. He tells him not to worry. Once he enters seclusion and breaks through to the golden core stage, he will not forget the 3 promises he made to Chao Hong. They approach the boundary where the protective array still shrouds the exit. The mist has not yet dispersed. Chao Hong glances at the churning fog and asks whether Dao Suwangji dares to charge through it. Chao Hong immediately engulfs himself in flame and, laughing, says there is nothing to fear as he shoots straight through the mist. In the Taihang boat's control room, the Grand Preceptor steadies himself. He notes that it will be another 14 years before the white mist disperses again, but he is already 71 years old. By the time he reaches 85, he will be at his limit, unable to pilot the Taihang boat at all. With nothing left to linger for in this life, he decides that today he will uncover the truth of the land of immortal severance. As the boat pushes forward, the fog below the ruined abyss shrouds everything. A vast expanse of white surrounds him, giving rise to a strange sense of unreality. Then, suddenly, the Taihang boat jolts sharply, as though it has struck something invisible. The hull trembles violently. The Grand Preceptor wonders if this is the astral wind layer. Chao Hong had warned that the astral wind blades here could tear a mortal apart instantly, and even Foundation establishment cultivators must rely on spiritual energy to endure it. He silently acknowledges that without the protective formation array, the consequences would be disastrous. Half a shurchen later, under his careful control, the Taihang boat finally passes through the astral wind layer. The violent shaking fades, and ahead of him spreads an endless, dazzling light. He has escaped the immortal severance grand array. Beyond it, his path unfolds rapidly. He reaches the cultivation world, gains a rare cultivation method through sheer fortune, and forms his golden core within 100 years. His cultivation advances steadily thereafter. 1,000 years later, he attains the Tao and ascends. In the immortal world, he starts from the lowest immortal official and climbs step by step, eventually standing as an immortal emperor overlooking all immortals. Afterward, he shatters the spatial barrier of the immortal world and ascends to the god realm, beginning as a minor existence and, after 10,000 years of cultivation, reaching the God King stage, becoming the strongest being in that realm. Endless tribulations follow. He ascends into the primeval God realm, starts again from the lowest rank, and after another 10,000 years of cultivation, reaches the primeval God King stage, becoming the supreme existence of the primeval God domain. After that, he went through countless hardships and ascended to the primeval God realm, becoming a low-level gatekeeper there, before starting all over again from the beginning. Then, in the next instant, the Grand Preceptor finds himself back inside the Taihang boat. He cannot believe what he is seeing. He wonders aloud whether everything he experienced just now had been nothing more than an illusion caused by the illusory light layer, and he also questions why the boat has suddenly turned around. Finding himself in a completely different world, he remarks that, according to Ku Hong's map, he has already left the illusory light layer and arrived at the third layer of the immortal severance grand array. array, the inversion layer. He concludes that the Taihang boat must have navigated away from the illusory light layer automatically, which is likely the reason he woke up. He notes that he had lost consciousness inside the illusory light layer, yet the Taihang boat still managed to travel to the inversion layer on its own. He considers the possibility of allowing the Taihang boat to control its own direction while he merely provides the power needed to accelerate. A faint intuition then rises from the Taihang boat, directing him which way to go, and he follows its guidance by accelerating forward. He identifies the next region as the fourth layer of the Immortal Severance Grand Array, the Raging Fire layer. Just as expected, by following the direction indicated, the Taihang boat continues its automatic navigation, and he soon arrives smoothly at the Raging Fire layer. At this point, he concludes that this must indeed be a backdoor left behind by the cultivator who originally operated the Taihang boat during the ancient mortal migration. Such a vessel, he reasons, would naturally be designed to pass through the Immortal Severance Grand Array on its own. Now confident, he stops attempting to steer and instead focuses solely on supplying power while allowing the Taihang boat to handle the rest. Even as the vessel passes through raging fire, profound ice, and violent thunderbolts, each place appearing unimaginably dangerous, the Taihang boat consistently avoids disaster at the last possible moment. The journey remains perilous, but never fatal. In this manner, he soon reaches the final layer, the darkness layer. Ku Hong had once mentioned that this layer is not particularly dangerous, merely an expanse of endless dark. Feeling relieved, the Grand Preceptor lets out a breath and murmurs to himself that once he passes through this point, the cultivation world lies ahead. After 6 lifetimes of reincarnation, he feels that he has finally reached the threshold. But then, before he can savor the moment, a colossal monster, unimaginably gigantic, opens its mouth wide in the darkness. Everything goes black. Instantly, Grand Preceptor Li Fan finds himself suspended in limbo, where the simulation calmly informs him that the simulation has ended. He is exhausted now, breathing heavily, and clearly frightened. He wonders what that enormous thing was just now. He notes that when Chao Hong and Dao Xuanji passed through the Immortal Severance Grand Array, neither of them encountered such a creature in the darkness layer, so he cannot understand why he had. He considers whether it might be some mechanism that targets mortals specifically. He concludes that the most prudent choice is still to wait for the great mist to disperse and for the light to emerge from the bottom of the ruined abyss before attempting further exploration. Even so, he admits to himself that although he failed at the very end, the gains from this life have far exceeded all expectations. After choosing to retain the Taihang boat, he begins his 7th life. In Anchor Year 4, he leads his trusted aides to Qian Hong's tomb once again. This time, he uses a spray infused with mortal miasma to slowly corrode the defenses until the halting steel fragment's power is weakened to the point that it can no longer pierce armor. He chooses to recharge it, and as the progress bar begins to rise, he notes that the fragment remains somewhat damaged, but the anchor charging progress still increases by 25%. He calculates that 3 more such efforts will allow him to unlock the second anchor point. He then remarks that the other items in the tomb no longer hold any value for him. After instructing his men to reseal the tomb, he departs the graveyard. In Anchor Year 5, he finds himself unable to resist returning to the eastern ruined abyss. He tells himself it will only be a quick look, with no intention of descending. Peering downward, he confirms that the sight is just as unbelievable as before. At that moment, he thinks that if he were piloting the Taihang boat right now, he could probably fly straight into the cultivation world. He asks himself whether he truly needs to wait another 15 years. He reflects further. If he allows Huanjin to keep charging because he is too timid to act, how can he ever hope to achieve the Great Tao? He reassures himself that he has already tried this path once in his previous life. As long as he is careful and avoids the unknown monster lurking in the darkness layer, he believes he can escape this accursed land. Grand Preceptor Li Fan tells himself that as long as he is careful enough to avoid the unknown monster in the darkness layer, he should be able to leave this damned place. But before he can reassure himself further, a massive burst of light erupts from deep within the abyss. He immediately sees something terrifying. Exhaustion washes over him, and he struggles to breathe steadily. Countless whispering voices suddenly echo in his mind, luring him to walk straight into the ruined abyss. He realizes that if the light from the bottom of the abyss had not pierced through the Immortal Severance Grand Array at that exact moment, he might already have stepped forward and fallen to his death. 15 years later, Anchor Year 20. Grand Preceptor Li Fan explains that Huanjin has finally finished charging. With renewed confidence, he returns to the ruined abyss. This time, he pilots the Taihang boat and after a perilous but ultimately safe journey, reaches the Thunderbolt layer. He stops just above the darkness layer. A powerful wind begins to rise, and under its influence, the raging thunderbolts gradually weaken. Small specks of light begin emerging from the pitch-black depths below. He uses this precious illumination to search for the monster lurking in the darkness, but despite scanning every direction, he cannot spot anything. As the light rapidly fades, he stops hesitating. He drives the Taihang boat at full speed, racing downward toward the bottom of the ruined abyss. But just as before, the monster appears again. He immediately concludes that his earlier guess was correct. The creature harbors extreme malice toward mortals. Perhaps its mission is to devour any mortal who dares approach this place. Even so, he manages to maneuver the Taihang boat upward, pulling away from the monstrous presence. He rises higher and higher, shouting for the boat to ascend as the creature relentlessly pursues him. The enormous monster continues to chase, trying to swallow the vessel whole. However, once he reaches the Thunderbolt layer, he notices something strange. The creature suddenly halts. It refuses to leave the edge of the darkness layer and does not cross upward. Using the illumination from the Thunderbolt layer, he finally gets a clear look at the entity. What he sees horrifies him. The creature is unimaginably large, a colossal beast terrifying in both size and appearance. He can barely comprehend what kind of existence it is. He mutters inwardly that the thing resembles some kind of giant whale, so massive that the Taihang boat seems like a grain of dust beside it. Yet, somehow, every time he passes through the darkness layer, it manages to detect and pursue him. Realizing this, he admits that he will have to try different methods if he wishes to escape its reach. He comforts himself by noting that, fortunately, he still has plenty of chances to attempt this escape. Over the next 15 years, he repeatedly tries to force his way through the darkness layer. However, each time he does, he notices that the time it takes for the giant whale to detect him becomes shorter and shorter. As a result, he can only fight a brief running battle with the creature before being forced to retreat in miserable defeat. Anchor Year 25. Thunderbolt layer. He observes that only on the day the white mist retreats does the giant whale seem delayed by something, taking noticeably longer to discover him. He believes that, with this extra sliver of time, he might finally be able to fly all the way to the bottom of the ruined abyss. This time, he resolves to risk everything. He plans to charge downward at the absolute fastest speed possible, hoping to cross the darkness layer before the giant whale can react. As he descends at full speed, an illusory scene forms below, drawing closer and closer. But then, the giant whale's terrifying roar echoes through the darkness once again. It seems enraged, furious that this tiny boat has dodged its jaws again and again. Li Fan quickly realizes that there is not enough time. The creature will catch him. In desperation, he calls out to Huanjin. A notification appears, informing him that the simulation has ended. Once again, Grand Preceptor Li Fan chooses to forego all retention options and accelerate the charging progress. He notices, however, that the upper limit of his psychological age no longer increases. It seems he has finally reached the cap. He tells himself that it doesn't matter. He still has 748 years left to waste as he pleases. 8th life. In Anchor Year 4, he opens Qian Hong's tomb once again. He reflects that at least this life has not been completely meaningless. By Anchor Year 5, on the day the white mist retreats, the void transformation charging progress has already reached nearly 90%. But he knows that anything below 100% makes no real difference. He can only wait patiently. In Anchor Year 20, he attempts again and fails. In Anchor Year 35, he tries once more and still fails. He continuously adjusts the timing of his attempts and becomes increasingly skilled at maneuvering the Taihang boat. By Anchor Year 50, he decides not to force his way through the darkness layer anymore. He is already old. His reflexes and mental sharpness have declined significantly. Attempting another charge would be futile. Instead, he chooses to go meet his two old friends, hoping they might provide valuable clues. Once again, he hears the familiar voice of Chao Hong saying that Dao Shuangji should not push his luck. The Grand Preceptor cannot help remarking that hearing this sentence now fills him with a strange sense of nostalgia. He explains that he still uses the pretense of possessing a golden core cultivation method, to lure the two cultivators to the Grand Preceptor's manor. When they arrive, he asks whether either of them has ever seen such a monster. After 3 rounds of drinks, he brings out the scroll painting depicting the giant whale. He tells them that his ancestor once said on his deathbed that if their descendants ever had the chance to escape this land of despair in the future, they would not need to worry about anything else, because with the protection of the Sex Taihang boat, they would be safe. The only exception was the final layer, where a giant whale lurked, and that layer required extreme caution. Chao Hong is shocked. He asks why he never saw such a terrifying beast in the pitch-black void. Dao wonders aloud whether it could possibly be that creature. The Grand Preceptor notices Dao's reaction and comments that Dao seems to recognize the beast. Dao explains that he has not seen it personally, but has read about it in an ancient text. According to those records, there was once a sect in antiquity called the beast-taming sect. This sect had no profound cultivation methods. Instead, it relied solely on beast-taming arts to command the strange beasts of heaven and earth. Among the most famous of these beasts was a creature resembling the one in the painting. Chao Hong adds that now that the subject has been brought up, he vaguely remembers hearing about it. He believes it was called the realm-splitting whale. The Grand Preceptor asks if either of them knows a way to avoid such a creature. Dao admits he has only heard fragmented rumors. Chao Hong states that the strange beast disappeared from the cultivation world thousands of years ago, so they have no knowledge of its habits. The Grand Preceptor concludes inwardly that, in the end, he must rely on himself. After handing the cultivation method to Dao Shuangji and sending the 2 cultivators away, he chooses to end that life. 9th life. He opens Qian Hong's tomb yet again, wanting to absorb the halting steel fragment to charge Huanjin. Unfortunately, Huanjin does not respond this time. From anchor year 20 to anchor year 35 to anchor year 50, he continues trying again and again, but no matter what he attempts, he still cannot break through the darkness layer. By anchor year 65, he has reached 85 years of age. His lifespan is nearly exhausted, and he acknowledges that he is too old now. He can no longer compete in a battle of wits and daring against the realm-splitting whale. He decides he will not forfeit. Instead, he resolves to give up control of the Taihang boat entirely and allow it to drift slowly toward the bottom of the ruined abyss from the very beginning. The vessel drifts through the astral wind layer, the illusory light layer, the inversion layer, the raging fire layer, the profound ice layer, the thunderbolt layer, and finally the darkness layer. Soon, he witnesses something shocking. He wonders why the realm-splitting whale has not appeared this time. He is already near the very bottom of the ruined abyss, and yet the creature remains absent. He feels this is an opportunity he cannot miss. He commands the boat to accelerate at full speed. Only then does the whale begin to chase him. He becomes anxious, wondering why the creature suddenly discovered him at this exact moment. After thinking carefully, he realizes something crucial. He concludes that the realm-splitting whale cannot see, or perhaps chooses to ignore, objects moving at a constant velocity. As long as he maintains the same speed, he can pass through the Immortal Severance Grand Array safely. He begins to laugh wildly, declaring inwardly that the final shackle binding him to the land of immortal severance has finally been broken. He cannot stop laughing like a madman as the whale roars helplessly behind him, unable to reach the Taihang boat. Moments later, he transcends the darkness layer. Amidst his manic laughter and the whale's furious cries, the Taihang boat breaks through the rift between the two realms, heading straight toward the cultivation world. His surroundings blur. He feels as though he has instantly crossed the distance of several worlds. Immense pressure crushes down on him, causing blood to flow from every part of his body, yet he pays it no mind. Looking back toward the Immortal Severance Grand Array, Li Fan notes that his perspective has risen to an infinitely high vantage point. From this elevated view, he witnesses a sight he knows he will never forget for the rest of his life. There are realm-splitting whales, not one, not a handful, but hundreds. Then he realizes the number is even more terrifying. There are thousands, then tens of thousands of them. Countless realm-splitting whales drift silently through the void, carving out swath after swath of dark space. They tear open one isolated region after another, each one resembling the land of immortal severance from which he came. From this distant perspective, he sees the land he escaped slowly drifting farther and farther away from the cultivation world. Hit 2,000 likes and the next chapter drops instantly.